Hey guys, Aaron Hillier, and I want to talk to you about how to split test to get more clicks, more leads, and more sales. This is going to be a video series, a four-part mini series, or I'm guesstimating it's going to be 4 parts. For you advanced people, there's going to be some stuff here that you've never seen before. Just some amazing stuff, guys. You're going to learn a lot here. I think you really want to stick around and watch these video series. So if you are advanced, I think you should stick around. You're still going to learn some stuff, but you might want to check back with video 3 or video 4 at the beginning of those to see where it's at. If you really feel like your time's valuable and you're not going to get much out of these, if you're at that level. If you're not, then you definitely want to watch this because there's going to be some really cool stuff that we're going to share with you. All right. So with that said, let's go ahead and get started. What are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about what to test, what is testing, how we test, why do we test. How do we actually go through the process? How do we optimize? How do we actually use that knowledge we have to actually, make more clicks, leads, and sales like we talked about? So that's really what we're going to talk about, guys. So let's go ahead and get started with, talking a little bit about testing and why do we test? What is testing and so forth, right? So for starters, why do we even test to begin with? What does it matter, right? The key point here is that you can fail and fail and fail with whatever you're doing, but if you're testing, there is no such thing as failure, right? You're always getting feedback. You're learning, you're improving, you're growing, and that's what the testing allows you to do. It allows you to get that feedback. This is actually a key principle in neurolinguistics programming, NLP, which I've been studying quite a bit lately, that talks about the fact that there is no such thing as failure. Right? There is no failure. There's only feedback. Right? We only get feedback. So we test so that we can get that feedback and continue to improve. Right? So what you do is, let's say that you're testing a landing page, right? We might start out with a really bad landing page opt-in rate to get, leads, and we continue to test over time to improve that. And that's essentially what we're doing with our testing. Now, there's concepts of testing for split testing, right, which is what we're really going to talk about. You may have heard of the concept of A/B testing, which really stands for testing, one version of something versus the other, which is very similar to split testing, although they're kind of used interchangeably often, and we're going to kind of use them interchangeably through this mini-series, really. But split testing does allow you, if you know what you're doing, to test more than one thing. Whereas A/B is one against the other. But again, we're going to kind of use them interchangeably. There's also a notion of something called multivariate testing, where we're testing multiple things at a time. Now, we're not going to get into that in this series. That will be something down the road that's a lot more advanced, and you really don't need to worry about that unless you're at that point, right? So let's go ahead and get started with split testing. Now, when we get started with something, we have a lot of different things we can test, right? A lot of different things we can test, right? Let's say that we're doing an ad. Let's say that we're running an ad and we want to test an ad to make it improve, right? We can test, the headline of the ad. We can test an image if it has one. We can test the copy. And really, we would break this down into sections of the copy, right? We can test a button or link, and really I'm going to generalize this, guys. I'm going to combine these into something more general. We're going to call it a CTA, or call to actions, right? So if you don't know what that is, that's your command. It's your direction to get somebody to take action. It's your call for them to take action, to actually do something. Because people work by suggestions, and if you typically do not tell them to do something specific, they typically will not. So you usually want to have a call to action in virtually everything you do, right? So we want to test that call to action. Let's keep it there. There's a lot more we can test, guys. We can test, sizes of things, or fonts, or capitalization, or order of words, and things like that. But let's not get into that. Let's say this is all it is. Well, that's a lot to test right there. And then you've got a landing page, for example. A landing page. So let's say this was an ad. Right? For a landing page, You can test a lot of the same things, right? You got a headline. Depending on what you're doing, if you're doing kind of a long version of a landing page or a quick one, you can test the copy and you may have more or less. You may have an image or images. Or let's just put that in parentheses. You might have, it might be a background image. Or video, right? You can have background videos. You might be testing, the same thing, the CTAs. You might be testing whether something is above or below the fold and how that works, right? And what I mean by that is, and guys, this has changed, by the way. I'll get to that in a second. But if you've got something above where the user has to scroll in order to see it, we typically call that above the fold, right? So if you want to put your call to action, let's say it's a call to action button here as opposed to here, or maybe you do both, but you want to have something above the fold because people are a lot more likely to take action. Now, I said just a moment ago that this has changed, and it has changed, guys, because now we have mobile, and mobile actually alters the size, the layout, everything. So don't just assume something's above the fold when in fact on mobile, which may be the majority of your viewers in some cases, may actually be seeing it below the fold or far below the fold, right? So keep that in mind, guys. We might also test, whether a call to action, or let me do it over here so it makes sense, right? That button being, across the horizontal width versus just like this, maybe with the text box here, or maybe a text box here. So the layout itself we may test. I can keep going. There's a lot of things we could potentially test. And in all honesty, you've got to know where to start. Because if you test all these things, you're going to get nowhere. First of all, if you try to do that right from the get-go. And if you want to test them little by little, it may take you a very long time to be able to go through all of them. So we do something in order to make this effective. And what we do is we treat everything we do like an experiment, right? We talked about the fact that there's no such thing as failure, only feedback. So we treat it like an experiment, right? And when we do that, here's what we do. Think of your psychology class, or really any scientific class you've ever taken in high school or college or whatever. And if you haven't, it works the same way I'm about to describe for virtually all of them. You kind of learn a little bit about scientific theory. And when you test things, right, when you go through and actually conduct scientific experiments, right, when you conduct experiments, you always start off with the same thing, right? You start off with a control, and then you start off with a hypothesis, right? Your hypothesis is what you think will happen, right? Well, this is no different. When we start off with a control, we've got essentially what we call a winner, right? So if we were doing a split test of two versions, and we're going to talk more about this in a second, so it will make sense if you don't understand it. But let's say we declare A winner. A then becomes our control, right? It becomes our control. And we formulate a hypothesis. We formulate a hypothesis because we need to know what is more than likely going to actually give us the biggest return to start with, right? We would look at this and say, what do I feel is actually going to give me a bigger return if I focus on it? Which of these things? Because I can't just start arbitrarily because I'm just not going to have as great of a return if I do that, right? So we form a hypothesis. We say, I think that item X is going to outperform a variation of it if we test that against itself, right? So we always want to be testing, first of all. I call this the ABCs of marketing. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie, Glengarry Glen Ross, right? Where they talk about sales and they talk about closing, right? And there's a concept of the ABCs of sales called always be closing, right? And that's an awesome movie, by the way. I love that movie. Coffee's for Closers. I just absolutely love that movie. You can see I'm into movies and shows. I've got my Breaking Bad shirt on, and you'll see that through this series because I'm going to record all these in a row for you guys. so I can get them out there. But I think the ABCs of marketing is always be, testing, or that's not a C. Boy, I lost my train of thought. It's ABTs, I guess. I guess I feel like I had a C that worked, but you really should always be testing, guys. And the reason we do that is we can always be improving, even if you've got something that's a 99%. We can always get to that 100%. If it's 100%, then maybe we can improve the quality or leading up to something else or the next step, right? There's always something that we can improve upon. So we do that by forming a hypothesis. Now, where do we start, especially if you're just starting out, right? Where do we start? Let's say that we don't have a clue. If you're brand new, you don't have a clue of which of these are going to work out better, or where should I, where do I start? Right, I'm going to give you a couple pointers, a couple, places to start with. Typically speaking, the first thing people are going to see is the most important thing to test, or at least the first thing you want to test, more often than not, right? And that is the headline. Usually the headline is the first thing people look at, right? And that often makes the biggest difference, right? So we want to be testing the headline. Now, in an ad, and especially in particularly in Facebook, right? If we've got a Facebook ad, sideline ad, for example, and we've got the image, headline with some copy here, a URL, and maybe a call to action button, right? The most important factor is actually the image, right? The image. Beyond the headline, potentially an image, if it's a landing page and we have a video, then the video does matter for sure. It may not even be a background video, just a video. Right, that becomes important. And then really next to that is the most important thing typically. Everything is always worth testing. So anytime you learn something, you always want to put it to test, because even though I've been at this for a long time, I continue to get surprised. I always have good suppositions, and I tend to do well, but I always learn more, right? So we always test. Beyond that, the call to action tends to be the most important thing, because this is really your connecting point. This is where you're taking them to the next step. You're saying, I'm glad you like this ad now that I've grabbed your attention, now that I've stopped you in your tracks. Now go ahead and click this button to download my PDF, or click this button to see this free report, or click this button to watch this awesome video, or click this button to subscribe to my YouTube channel, or click this button to like my fan page, or whatever the case may be, right? Or from a landing page, or a lead capture page, or a squeeze page. Those tend to be interchangeable. There are slight variations, but I'm not going to get into those now, guys. The thing is, on that, the goal typically is to get a lead, to get an email address, right? Another form of a lead these days can be a phone number for a text messaging campaign, for example. But let's just say the standard email address. So your call to action might be, fill out this information, i.e. email address, or put your email below and, click the button, or subscribe, or enroll, or sign up now to get this free report, or to download this, or to see this, or to get access to this, or to sign up for this, or whatever that may be. That's your call to action, right? So now that we've got an idea of what to test, and then you want to test things against itself, right? So we want to be testing two versions of essentially the same thing. And I'm going to get into that in the next video. So I think that's a good point to stop this now. Guys, go ahead and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you're not there, for Aaron Hillier. Depending on where you're watching this at, go ahead and pop over there, subscribe to my YouTube channel, because I want to ensure you get high quality video training like this forever, right? We want to continue to deliver that to you. Go ahead and make sure you click the button below this, the link below this, regardless of where you're at. Continue on to video 2. I got some more important stuff coming for you real soon. I look forward to seeing you in just a moment.